Hi, welcome to Expand Your Us. I'm so glad that you could join me today. This week, I'm writing about education, and I'm glad for you to join me. I am the victim of an incomplete education. Most of us are. I attended excellent schools, and I'm grateful for the many ways I was invited into this excellence, rigor, and curiosity. However, like most Americans, I was exposed primarily to curricula written, sourced, and designed by white people. The last 2.5 decades have revealed the large gaps in my knowledge and the work I have to do to complete my education. Having now encountered the incredible diversity of thought that functionally shaped America, I realize the insularity, the poverty even, of our educational norms. As curricula designers in Tennessee, continue to grapple with laws banning conversations about how racial views or views of racial difference shape and shaped opportunity in America, I am more aware than ever that we're each responsible for who we read and listen to as we learn to be neighbors. We have an incredible wealth of cultural, literary, historical, and artistic legacies from every race, and we are diminished as a people when these voices are not actively taught in our schools. When we're primarily exposed to American history and literature through the work of white folks, we're taught to privilege white perspectives. We begin to believe that important cultural trends and innovations came exclusively from one segment of society. This narrow exposure lays a foundation for cultural racism, suggesting that people of color are physical in nature, while white people, with their higher order thinking and artistic expressions, meaningfully impact our national narratives, our literary heritage, and the production of culture. But American culture and history have been shaped by the voices, inventions, and perspectives of a rich variety of people from all walks of life. The idea of American democracy suggests that every person has value and is capable of contributing to our whole in necessary ways. The idea of American democracy suggests that, even if we have rarely lived up to those ideals. It is disingenuous for us to believe this while also pretending as if every important contribution to the common good came only from one race of people. Although this hypocrisy that affirms equality while codifying systems of inequality is one of our great national habits, America itself has nevertheless been deeply influenced by contributions from all types of people. Like our food, music, fashion, dancing, storytelling, and theologies, American literature as we know it would not exist without African American literature. Black cultural production is American cultural production. In the South, we love to think about our culture as one of genuine hospitality, gorgeous grounds, fine food, and excellent music. Because we have a legacy of erasing or diminishing the contributions of people of color, our educations fail to teach us that so many Southern traditions only exist because people of color worked independently of or collaboratively with white folks to create norms of hospitality in settings we cherish. In many famed Southern kitchens, Black cooks created the recipes published by white chefs, now beloved as Southern heritage. Here in Tennessee, whiskey distilling was mastered by enslaved men. Indeed, Jack Daniel's Distillery now explains that Jack himself learned to distill from a Black man named Nearest Green. Best practices in agriculture, building, sewing, and carpentry were perfected by people of color. I offer these anecdotes to remind us that any American historical narrative that does not include the contributions of Black people is incomplete. Most of us understand that our musical heritage is not complete without the contributions of jazz and the blues, pioneered by African Americans. Jazz and rock and roll, were largely commodified by whites, but they were created by Black Americans. Indeed, Elvis became famous by publishing songs first performed by musicians of color. We sacrifice creative pride and cultural dignity when we erase the role of Black cultural production in America's story. What do we forfeit if we investigate our cultural understanding of ourselves to make room for all who contributed? I'm going to say we don't forfeit much at all. Our educational norms often fail to reflect our entire heritage, and states that ban any teaching that could be loosely attributed to critical race theory or even racial difference are actively attempting to erase American history. We need not remain in ignorance. Some of our best early links between literature, sociology, and ethnography were established by Black writers like Zora Neale Hurston, a gifted writer of fiction in her own right. Many of you have read Their Eyes Were Watching God. Hurston traveled through Florida recording the stories of African Americans as they experienced the world. Hurston helped prove that anthropology is incomplete without ethnography and autoethnography. Many of us were taught to celebrate early writers who noticed such cultural differences through travel, like Herman Melville or Mark Twain. But Black writers like James Weldon Johnson and later Paula Marshall, far less read, continued and advanced this style of writing about the helpful collaborations and differences one discovers as they travel at home and abroad. Acknowledging the full diaspora while claiming our full history speaks powerfully into our current discussions about identity and the ways that we explore national loyalties. If such voices were celebrated in education, then we might be better equipped to now face a world in which citizenship, migration, and nationality seem to clash in really violent ways. In school, many of us were exposed through literature to the tension women face as they struggle to position themselves as whole subjects with needs and wants and agency to act on those needs and wants. We read Emily Dickinson or Kate Chopin or Sylvia Plath, celebrating the singularity of their voices. Many of us were not exposed to writers like Nella Larson or Maya Angelou, though, who wrote compellingly of the intersection of gender and race in a woman's desire for agency. Larson's work is accessible, and she explores the life choices of a disappointed upper-class woman in a way that Chopin's work simply can't. Activists like Sojourner Truth, way before this, revealed the subtle and not so subtle ways that the voices of Black women were diminished, doubted, and ignored. She was a forerunner to feminism, asserting that gender and racial binaries can be used to silence women who do not conform to cultural norms. So many voices shape American identity, and there's no need to diminish one voice in order to make room for another. Education is a place where a variety of voices can be elevated, not in order to rewrite history, but instead so that we can embrace and elevate the conflicting voices who shaped our history. This is the core of the rhetorical enterprise. This is what the liberal arts do. This is what discourse is all about. Our cultural norms, heritage, conception of self, and identities are in fact shaped by many brown, Black, and white voices of America. Our educational norm is to celebrate and memorialize only the white voices, rather than to openly teach a wide variety of perspectives, recognizing the myriad voices that shaped American culture, literature, and history. We are not products of Black labor and white innovation. We are the culmination of many voices expressing their God-given giftedness to help us translate and understand experiences of life in America. Historical erasure ensures that we are victims of this incomplete education. As the school year continues, the hope of this moment is that diminished voices of color have always existed. We only need to recognize the deficits we have and then do the work. We each need to do the work to continue and complete our education. Ask to see your child's syllabus and ask how many Black, Indigenous, or writers of color are included. Contact me and ask for a recommendation if you want to expand your education. I'm always reading, I'm always teaching, and I'd love for you to join me if you realize that you also have an incomplete education and you want to do something about it. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great week.